Good morning. It's wonderful to be here and to see all of you. And your whole faces. On the suggestion of a colleague, I listened to a podcast from an NPR storytelling series, Queued Up. This episode, entitled Snap Judgment, was about a young man named Matt Hay, who has a rare brain disease called neurofibromatosis type 2. And when Matt learned he was going to lose his hearing as a result of this disease, he prepared himself in ways that you might expect. He learned to read lips, he learned sign language, and he also tried to anticipate what things he might miss about being able to hear. And near the top of that list was music. As he prepared for a day when he may not hear, Matt made an independent study of all of the music that he loved, especially the music associated with critical moments, really wonderful moments in his life. He made it his mission to memorize every crescendo, every lyric, every riff of all of his favorite songs, and amongst them, one from Prince, one from Fish, so you know his age, he's kind of younger. As he called it, it was the soundtrack of his future. When Matt finally did lose his hearing completely, it wasn't exactly the experience for which he had prepared. There were other things he missed. The sound of his wife's laugh, hearing the words, "I love you," his unborn child's first words. It was also harder to implement all the things he thought he would need. He didn't seem to remember enough signs and ended up fingerspelling or writing everything down to communicate with his wife. He didn't realize it would be hard to express a feeling or have an argument, or even just communicate what he needed. He worried about being that guy who needs accommodations when he spent time with friends or family. When Matt's doctor offered him an auditory brainstem implant to restore some of his hearing, the technology was still pretty new, and he was uncertain about the benefits, but Matt ultimately decided that it would be worth it because of all the things he would miss. He didn't want to miss out on hearing his children laugh or cry. Just as he did not lose his hearing all at once, neither did the surgery restore Matt's hearing immediately. His brain had to relearn how to hear with this new device, and the device needed to be constantly tuned, sort of the audiology version of getting fitted for eyeglasses. So Matt would be given certain sounds to identify, and an audiologist would tune his device based on what he could hear. Suddenly, all those songs Matt had memorized became useful in a way that he never would have predicted. Having such detailed knowledge of so many songs gave him the perfect opportunity to practice hearing sounds again. One striking aspect of Matt's story is that his preparation for becoming deaf was also his preparation for hearing. Now think about Bartimaeus, the blind man in our gospel reading. Is it possible that Bartimaeus' blindness was also his preparation for sighting and for seeing? In the short span of this story, Bartimaeus is on the receiving end of the range of responses many people with non-normative bodies might receive: dismissal, pity, disdain. The way these dismissive bystanders address Bartimaeus is as someone who's in the way or who's asking for too much. They didn't ask him what Bartimaeus needed, didn't consider why he was shouting, or even more incredibly, how he knew it was Jesus, son of David, who had come to town. Since blindness can be both a physical condition and a symbol for ignorance, it is notable that blind Bartimaeus is the very one who accurately and openly identifies Jesus. He sees more than the sighted. When Jesus hears Bartimaeus calling for him, he stops. Others were telling Bartimaeus to shut up, to pipe down, but Jesus stops and asks others to find the man calling for him. When he addresses Bartimaeus, he treats him as a human being, not as a perceived disability. Jesus simply asks what he can do for Bartimaeus. He makes no assumptions that Bartimaeus is his blindness, or that his blindness is something that he needs to be healed. But when Bartimaeus tells Jesus of his desire to see, then Jesus does heal him. We're not told what happened to Bartimaeus after that, only that he followed Jesus. The responses to Bartimaeus' blindness are remarkably similar to the responses people will soon have to Jesus' death and resurrection. Dismissal, disdain, pity. Just as they had assumed that Bartimaeus' blindness was a disability with no possibility of a cure, so also will they view Jesus' death as an ending without any future possibility. Did the experience of having a non-normative body enable Bartimaeus to better understand Jesus, the Son of David, as one who also has a non-normative body? Bartimaeus probably could not predict that the man who had just cured his blindness would soon be crucified and rise from the dead. But still, had his blindness given him a sixth sense for others who did not fit the expectations of those around them? We don't know for how long Bartimaeus followed Jesus, or where or how exactly he followed. We don't know if he was at the crucifixion or if he was one of those who met the resurrected Christ. We only know that he recognized Jesus without seeing him and knew enough to buck the social expectations of blind beggars to get Jesus' attention. The resurrected Christ was someone also with a non-normative body. Was his experience of blindness his preparation for sighting Jesus? As Matt's oral acuity improved, he sang some of the songs he had memorized as lullabies to his children, well before they could appreciate the words or even the effort it took their dad to learn them and to be able to sing them once again. Matt had hoped that music would help him remember a time when he could hear. But now those same songs had transformed from memories of significant moments, moving into his first apartment, his first date with his future wife, to new memories with his children. He never could have anticipated that this music would evoke anything but loss. Often the things we identify as disabilities or disabling are things that are simply not normative. On a tour of a facility with others, a woman with a prosthetic leg came prepared with her crutches, her prosthetic, and a wheelchair. The guide was sort of taken aback by all this equipment. The confusion on his face said that he was trying to anticipate all of the places the group would be visiting and whether there were stairs or ramps or elevators. He was also silently trying to figure out how the group could manage all the gear for the duration of the tour. Being pretty perceptive of how people saw her, the woman assured the guide that she had seen every sort of situation and was confident that she could navigate the tour. And then she added, "The problem is not actually how I will navigate the space. I am able to adapt to many spaces. None of you can adapt the way I can. The problem is that your built environment is only for one type of body, and I don't have that kind of body." She confronted head-on the idea that she has a non-normative body. Had we as a society decided that people with prosthetic legs are normative, we would have built environments that actually worked for more people. Expanding our inclusivity and accessibility expands our possibilities for all people. When Jesus heard a blind man shouting for him, he stopped. He spoke directly to the man and asked what he needed. Jesus expanded his circle to include someone who wanted to be part of the group, not just hover on the fringes. He included Bartimaeus without making exceptions, caveats, or excuses for Bartimaeus' blindness. He included Bartimaeus just as he presented himself. No one escapes being non-normative in some way. We will all find ourselves on the fringe of something. Sometimes this will bear greater consequences than others. Some of us will find ourselves perpetually on the outside of what society is willing to tolerate in ways that make living life difficult, to say the least. If we only ever see how bodies are different, how will we recognize the risen Christ in his different, non-normative body? How will we know the power of miracles? How will we believe that we can be healed? How will we know what to ask Jesus to do for us? When everything must fit into binary categories, we risk missing the God that is right in front of us. Jesus drew a wide circle around his community, wide enough to be inclusive and accessible to everyone. Don't miss the opportunity to meet the Christ before you just because the meeting does not fit your expectations. Putting aside doubts, putting aside fears, putting aside unbelief, don't miss the opportunity to ask Jesus to heal you. Amen.